Hello, friends. It's that time. Baseball's back. Opening day. It's a beautiful time to be a baseball fan. But with that, obviously you have some fandom and you want some stuff to buy, right? So our good friends at FOCO have you laced up, ready to go for that. For being a dedicated listener to this here podcast, the Bleed Los podcast, on the description below, if you click on that link on whatever platform you're listening to on this podcast, Spotify, Apple, whatever, Google App Store you may be listening from, there is a dedicated link that if you click on that, it'll take you on over to FOCO's website. And once you add whatever to the cart, it'll give you a discount for being a dedicated listener to this here podcast. Thank you, huge thank you to them for supporting the podcast, for supporting Dodgersbeat, and again, they'll get you laced up with whatever you want. They've been doing a fantastic job with these World Series bobbleheads. They've done great work on them. Super stoked to be getting those any day now. And, again, terms and conditions do apply. Please see the FOCO website for more details. But if you click on that link, it'll take you to the website. Add whatever you want to your cart. It'll apply a discount. Again, terms and conditions do apply. Please see FOCO's website for more details. Huge thank you to FOCO. FOCO.com. FOCO. And as always, Bleed Los. Not the podcast, but the clothing company, Bleed Los. You know, it's funny on this podcast, we talk a lot about, I'll leave it there. But I'm surprised that Bleed Los hasn't sued us yet because we're using their name clearly. So if you go to www.bleedlos.com, you can check out the Joe Kelly fight shirts, the Culichi shirts, for Julio Urias. All that stuff is there. You can check it all out. Once you enter whatever you want to your cart, and you enter the code BleedLosPod, you will save 10% on your purchase. And again, terms and conditions do apply. Please see the Bleed Los website for more details. But huge thanks to Bleed Los for supporting this here podcast. Two programming things. One, all of these podcasts are going to begin to drop every single Monday throughout the season. We're super stoked to be discussing regular season baseball with you all. So as always, please chime in on Twitter, subscribe. Any feedback that you can leave us, we will gladly take because it helps us able to book guests, and we want to book the best guests that we can for you. So to all you loyal subscribers and listeners, huge thank you to you. One other thing to note is we have our own Twitter account now, Bleed Los Pod. We have our own Twitter account, like I said. It's not just going to be exclusively through the Dodgersbeat Twitter. So now it's at Bleed Los Pod. So we'll be tweeting out there, all things related to this podcast and all things Dodgers too. So again, at Bleed Los Pod, please give it a follow. As always, any questions you might have throughout the week, throw us a line with that handle, and we'll gladly address them for you on the podcast. So we'll check those every week. We'll do like a weekly mailbag. So please send over any questions, concerns, outbursts, complaints, whatever. Send it over, and we'll gladly address it. But again, thank you to FOCO, to Bleed Los, and to you, the dedicated listener to this podcast. Without you guys, we wouldn't be doing it. So to all you loyal, subscribed listeners and to our podcast, to the Dodgersbeat website, thank you. Huge thank you. But without further ado, here's another edition of the Bleed Los podcast. Hello, friends, and just like that, we're talking regular baseball. It's your boys Alonso y Juan with the voice in the sky, the babyface killer himself, Roger. And this week we are joined by a special guest, Stephen Webb. Stephen is a writer for Dodgersbeat, obviously the platform that we do this podcast with. Stephen, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Thank you again for joining us. And
Sure thing.
and Juan, I know that you've been reading Stephen's articles. You've been hyping him up. What can you tell us about some of the articles that he's been dropping?
Well, Stephen did a wonderful preview series. So now that we are in the first full swing week of Major League Baseball, I would take it for those of you who hadn't had an opportunity to read those articles, go back and read those articles, get ready for the season. Also find out if Stephen was right, with his predictions. But these articles are all available on the Dodgersbeat website. So feel free to log on and check those out. But he has a preview for every position we're talking pitchers, everything 1 through 9. So two of the articles that I actually want to point out and I want to talk to Stephen about, now that we've had these first 4 games and monitoring the social media, I see that Matt Beatty is getting a lot of hate from Dodger fans. Now, mind you, Matt Beatty hasn't had that many plate appearances yet, but he doesn't have anything to show for it. But Matt Beatty was part of your first base preview, Stephen. And in that first base preview, it was primarily that we're going to see Max Muncy get the majority of the time. Mind you, Max Muncy is I think he's the only Dodger position player that played all 4 games this weekend. Correct me if I'm wrong there, guys.
I think you're right. Yeah.
So aside from Max Muncy, who else would we see at first base? Probably Cody Bellinger, right? But you had listed Matt Beatty as an option at first base. And when I read that, I thought that was really interesting because I thought, I don't think that guy has a natural position. They put him in the outfield, and I've seen him play first base. Do you think that first base is Matt Beatty's best position? Is that his natural position? What are your, prospects on Matt Beatty this year?
Well, I'm not that high on Matt Beatty. I don't think he's very high up on the depth chart in any position, to be honest, because he could play, I guess, outfield, but you've got Pollock and Taylor and now McKinstry, who are probably better outfielders than he is, and he could play some infield, but really the only place he's played infield in the big leagues is first base. He in 2019, I guess he got 35 games at first base, at least a few innings, and then last year he had 13 games that he played at first last year. That's certainly been his primary position in the infield, but you're right. I think, he's more of like a classic DH kind of guy. If the DH couldn't hit that well. I don't know. It's Beatty is I think not going to be a great piece this year. I think in a pinch he'll do in first. I think in a pinch he'll do in left, but boy, I wouldn't count on him for much defense. I think the best thing that Matt Beatty is he's a decent bat if you need somebody to jack one late in the game. I think he's got some pop and he can go deep. So there's that as probably his best asset right now. I don't see him getting a lot of time in the field this year. Maybe a lot of pinch hitting and DHing in American League parks or something like that. That's sort of what I would see as the future for Matt Beatty this year. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, certainly first base is a place where everybody who played there last year underperformed. Max Muncy, who really came on strong in the playoffs, was sort of hard to watch during the regular season with a lot of swings and misses and a lot of misjudgments of pitches, and he just was not looking good at the plate. He only hit 192 for the whole regular season last year, but he got his walks and he got enough of OPP to get a decent bit of scoring done. But first base it was a bit of a question mark for me, because if we get the same kind of performances this year that we got last year out of those guys, it's not going to be a great position for us.
That's a very interesting point that you say, because if you think, whenever Muncy does get rest, do you think then Cody Bellinger is going to get the majority of the time at first base when Muncy is resting?
That's the way I would go. I would put Bellinger at first and put Pollock into center, and have Taylor play left. Bellinger is going to be good in the field wherever we put him. That's for sure. But I think Beatty's going to get some action over there. Maybe if the game's out of hand, but I know he's certainly not going to be a defensive replacement ever.
Well, one of the other players that was getting a lot of heat on social media after this first week of the baseball season was Jimmy Nelson. And you also wrote a very nice profile on Jimmy Nelson. Yes, Jimmy Nelson has pitched an inning and 2/3. And if we want to go ahead and overreact in this first week of baseball, we can go ahead and say that Jimmy Nelson has had a rough week, but I will defend Jimmy Nelson. But what are you expecting from Jimmy Nelson this year?
Well, I think he's going to be a real nice piece out of the bullpen for us. And just for the listeners who don't know his story, I mean, it's pretty amazing. The guy was a real solid starter for Milwaukee, and he was clipping along to be a real piece of the puzzle there in Milwaukee for quite a while. And then he was in a game in September of 2017 in Wrigley Field, and he smashed a double. Well, he thought it was going to be a double off of the wall in Wrigley. And he got halfway to second, and he said, "Oh no, Javi Baez has got the ball and I'm in trouble." So he turned around and he slid into first base, and he just jammed his pitching arm into the base. And the guy was he was such a gritty guy that he went out and actually pitched another inning with his damage to his pitching arm. And he ended up having to miss the rest of the season. And then, then he had elbow problems. Then he came to the Dodgers and he had back problems last year. And that's why his option wasn't picked up, and they just gave him the minor league contract. But when he got into spring training, he came ready to play, and his ERA during the spring was 0.00, and that's not nothing. I think he might have been a little amped up with those two pass balls in the first game, and maybe, and he didn't pitch badly today. I think kind of maybe he gave up that one double and a walk, and it wasn't horrible, but I think I got the 3 strikeouts in the inning. So he's a guy that can get a strikeout when you need one, and I think he might not. It all depends what happens when Gratterall and Kelly come back. I think he's probably the first piece to go once those two guys get back. But he's got a limited window of opportunity here that he really needs to shine. And he had off to a little bit of a rocky start, but I think today was better than the first day, and hopefully the next time will be better than today. So I think Jimmy Nelson will turn out to be a nice piece for us.
I agree with you. I'm rooting for Jimmy Nelson because I just think if Jimmy Nelson is good, it makes the Dodgers bullpen that much better. His numbers this week, he pitched an inning and 2/3. He gave up 3 earned runs. He had 3 bases on balls, but he had 4 Ks. And like I said, I'll defend him. I agree with you. I don't think he pitched that badly. That double that he gave up that brought in those 2 runs, Chris Taylor was shaded to right center. The guy, he didn't even hit it that hard. He just hit it to where the outfielder wasn't. if Chris Taylor is playing dead center, I think Chris Taylor gets to that ball. The inning is over, and we're not having this discussion, and we're having, hey, Jimmy Nelson had a nice bounce back. One thing I think we also need to take into account is when that game, you had a runner on second base, you had 2 outs, it was a 4-2 ball game. He struck out Trevor Story. Okay. He didn't just strike out some chump there. He lost his composure in that inning. He lost his control. I think after that second out, when he thought it was the third out and he was already walking off the mound, I think he lost something there because he walked the next batter on 4 straight balls. But the fact that after he gave up that double, that he was able to strike out Trevor Story, I think that bodes a very good sign. And you're right, because after the first game, his ERA was 27, and now his ERA is 16 point something. So it is getting better.
Progress.
So exactly, progress. So
that was high heat with Trevor Story. He just ate him up.
Yeah, so these are just little snippets of these wonderful preview series that Stephen Webb has done for every position on this Dodgers roster. All these articles are available on the Dodgersbeat's website, so Dodgersbeat website. So I suggest that you guys all go on there, check them out, and get ready for this season. We're just starting. It's the first full week of baseball, and it's good to actually be talking baseball, right, Alonzo?
No lies detected. I have 2 questions for you, Stephen. Only because as Juan knows, I like to play devil's advocate. 1, if Jimmy Nelson turns the ship around, which I expect him to, I'm a Jimmy Nelson guy. And they not just because of his story, but his stuff is legit. Let's say he turns it around and Bruce Starr and Joe Kelly come back. What do they do then? What do you think they do then? And then 2, you were talking about how you weren't high up on Matt Beatty. Who would you say you are super high on going into the season?
Well, there's the easy answers. Of course, I could say Corey Seager. That would be fun. I think Gavin Lux is going to be have a breakout year. That's the guy I'm really high on, who's maybe a little under the radar for most Dodger fans because he's sort of underperformed in previous incarnations of the Dodgers. So hopefully I think we can expect good things from. I mean, he had a great weekend. So I'm feeling good about Gavin Lux so far. And as what will they do when Kelly and Gratterall come back? Boy, that's I don't know who I would get rid of, to be honest. I like Jimmy Nelson and I'd like to see him hang around. But boy, I guess Gonsolin's on the rack now. Dennis Santana's in. So I certainly would take Jimmy Nelson over Dennis Santana. So we'll see how long Gonsolin's going to be out with this injury. Hopefully he'll be back quickly and be ready. But I always think that maybe once the minors get up and running, they'll want to get Gonsolin more innings,
right.
And just want him to get some work in. So I could see him, going up and back a lot and getting starts down in Oklahoma City. So we'll see. I would like Jimmy Nelson to be on the team for a while and see what he can do. I give him a good month before we make any decisions on his future.
And I had made that prediction too about Tony, that he would be like the marquee 3A guy going into the season anyway. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened. And sorry, Juan, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I think it's going to be a while before we see Joe Kelly up here. I think Stephen's right. I think probably Dennis Santana will be the first one to go down. Right. But I think someone who should be a candidate to go down, and it's nothing against the guy, is Scott Alexander. I don't know that we need another lefty in the bullpen. I think Victor Gonzalez is proving himself as reliable. The only thing, and I think we'll get into this later on, is being that David Price is your other lefty out of the bullpen, how often can you use David Price? Are you going to have to give him rest? So, but I think Scott Alexander might be a candidate only because he was up to it.
Not a bad
Go ahead,
choice.
Stephen.
Not a bad choice. I mean, Alexander was kind of the forgotten man last year. He was off the roster, and did he even pitch in September? I don't think so. He disappeared at the end of the year.
Yeah, and it's just I bring up Alexander again also just because for that last spot in the bullpen, it was between him and Dennis Santana. So obviously with Bruce Starr coming back, and what was really interesting, did you guys know this? But the reason why Bruce Starr got that late start in spring training was because he had COVID.
I did not know that.
I thought they kept that really under the radar, really hush. So he was behind because it took him a while to recover from COVID.
I thought it was visa issues like Keybert. So listen, if he's listening to this, get feeling better as a fellow person that had the COVID. It's a rough thing to come back from. Moving along though, let's look at the series. The Dodgers had some missed opportunities in game one. Arguably the best lefty of his generation, Clayton Kershaw, struggled. And I as I look back, I wish that I could have watched this game with Roger, just because I could feel the anger coming through the text messages and the concern. And literally in my mind, it's like, yo, it's game one. It's game one. Like let's just take a breather here for a second. But Kershaw obviously.
Alonso?
Yes.
Alonso?
Go ahead.
You're mistaking. That was Juan's messages.
Oh,
those are Juan's.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, who's the one that broke up Julio's no-hit bid today?
Yeah, that was cold-blooded. You would have been immediately ejected from the dugout within seconds. Like, yo. Unfortunately, also, that was Clayton Kershaw's worst opening day outing of his career. He got rocked. He allowed 5 runs on 10 hits. It just straight up was not a good time. But they were able to right the ship in game 2. We had talked about it offline a little bit, but Trevor Bauer with an impressive debut. Obviously, what transpired, after the no-hit component got a little dicey there. And, we saw the debut of David Price even in that game, but they were able to hold on to that and take that game. And then Walker Buehler started after that. And, he a little bit of a rocky start, no pun intended. But again, they were able to kind of, stay in cruise control. And then today, Julio Diaz, I mean, what else can you say about Julio? I mean, that dude just looks like he just left game 7, that game of the World Series, came in here and just kept it going. And I mean, he was rolling. So all in all, as we look at the series recap, obviously it started rocky, ended great. We'll start with Juan. Juan, how do you feel, kind of, obviously it's the first series. So it's like the Monday morning quarterback situation. Everyone's going to overreact. Oh no, what the hell? But anyway, be that as it may, how do you feel after you've seen not only 4 games, but 4 games at Coors, which is one of the harder places to play in general?
Well, here's the thing, right? I think the Dodgers are in a little tough situation in the sense where the minimum that was expected of them was to win 3 out of 4. If they would have swept the Rockies, everyone would have said, well, you guys beat the Rockies. You guys didn't beat anybody, right? But if they would have split the series, or even worse, if they would have lost the series, it would have been the end of the world, because Bill Plaschke calls this the greatest team ever. It'd be like, how do you lose to the Rockies, right? So the Dodgers did what they were supposed to do, which I think is a very good sign. If you keep winning series and series, by the end of the year, you're more than likely winning the division. And I can't stress enough how important it is to actually win the division. You don't want to go into a wild card game where either you're going to face the Mets maybe, or you're going to face the Braves, So I think it's very important that they do win the division. So they got to beat up on these teams. They got to win these games against the Rockies, against the Diamondbacks, teams that they're better. They have to win the series. The one thing that I am most impressed about was the starting pitching. Even though Kershaw did not, pitch well, I don't think he pitched badly either. I don't think his numbers accurately represent how he pitched in that game. His defense did not help him at all in that game. They also, you got to tip your hat off to the Rockies. I think the Rockies were doing a really good job of just hitting the ball where the Dodgers weren't. They were beating the shifts. So, yeah, it was a rough outing. But other than that, Bauer gave you 7 innings. Bueller gave you 6, and then Urias gave you 7+. I love that. I'm a firm believer in that Ozzie Guillen rule, where you tell the starter, you give me 6. I don't care how bad you are or how much you're getting hit, you give me 6. If your starters can consistently give you 6 innings with the way this bullpen is, I mean, we can get into Jansen, we can get into Corey Knable, Victor Gonzalez. There were some relief pitchers that I think looked really, really sharp in that first week. So for me, the thing that I'm most encouraged about this start, and who knows whether it's going to be maintainable, but the starters giving length, I think, is really, really important.
No, and I agree with that. I personally, I think that the Dodgers, pitching staff as a whole, not just the starters, but the relievers, being able to adjust. Because adjusting at any ballpark is one thing. Adjusting at Coors is a completely different thing. Clayton Kershaw did not have any bite on any of his breaking balls. Truthfully, I don't even think that's his fault. That's just the Coors effect. Coors does that, right? And then, but at the same time, guys were able to adjust. Walker Buehler, that start kind of shows you that. It started a little rough, and then he was able to kind of get into the zone a little bit, if you will, and he was able to cruise there towards the end of his start. So, it's one of those things where obviously it's the first series of the season. So everything's weird. Obviously there's still COVID protocols in place from the spring until now. And regardless, it's still kind of a weird season again. Once again, the only difference is there's also fans now. So I know those guys are also getting accustomed to fans being in the stands because it throws things for a loop to a certain degree. So all in all, though, what I was the most impressed with myself, Corey Knable came out, and even though it was a very brief appearance, that's an appearance that he needed, and that's the kind of go if you will that he needed to kind of show everyone, okay, he still has it. So in my opinion, he's one of the marquee relief pitchers when he's healthy, and he showed that with his outing, and that was huge for him because the expectations were high for Walker, they're high for Trevor, and they're high for ODS, so we knew what was going in. But I think one of those, like as Stephen said a few minutes ago, an unforgotten guy is Corey Knable, because that dude very easily could be a closer. He could be a setup guy, and he could be, to a certain degree, a long relief guy. He's very versatile. And if you guys remember back in 2017 when the Dodgers faced him in that postseason, it's when they did the whole reliever as a starter thing. And he was one of those guys that they threw into that mix, and he's got electric stuff. So for me, that was huge going into that. And before I get to Steven, one last thing about Julio. Julio, not only did he go the 7+, but it was a very efficient start. 79 pitches. That's insanity. And then furthermore, not only 7 innings plus, but 3 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts at Coors. So, all in all, that sort of stuff, to see out of Julio going into this year. And as you guys, you guys know, of course, I don't know if Steven does, but we had Rafael Arroyo on, who worked with Julio, and he was telling us what to look out for, and it was his breaking ball. And that changeup was elite today. And the way that he was moving everything from high to low and working the zone, that's the Julio that I expected. And that's the Julio that if we have that all year, again, he's showing everyone that what everyone thinks he is. He's a number 2 anywhere else that isn't the Dodgers. And that's what's preposterous about this rotation, is that they have a guy that's number 2, that's their 4 guy. So that's insanity. But on that note, though, Stephen, what was your takeaway from the series, and how did you feel about everything?
Yeah, I agree with you. I really liked what I saw from Knable. And just to remind the listeners who might not be following his career that much, in 2017, the guy had a 1.78 ERA. It's over 76 performances. That's unreal. If we can get a 1.76 out of him this year, I don't expect it, but that is, he's got some elite stuff, and if he can get back to where he was back in 2017, it would be unbelievable. It would just, he would be like, and I like it what Roberts did. He gave Jansen the day off and said, Knable's my guy today, and if now Trinan is another guy who once was an elite closer, so you've got 3 guys who potentially could be big guys, big step up guys in the ninth inning, and that's a very good position for Dave Roberts to be in, because he could go matchups. He could look at who's got the hot hand at the moment, and I think Knable, if he continues to pitch like this, is going to be he's going to give Roberts the opportunity to say, I'll use Jansen when I know I can get something out of Jansen, and I don't have to run him out there every time I have a close situation. And because I think Jansen's days of being a closer every day are kind of over. I think he'll close when the time is right, but I don't think he can pitch, successive days or 3 days in a row and have a successful outing anymore. So, the guy's 33 now. So he's got to be treated with kid gloves, I think. So Knable and Treinen, Treinen didn't look that great this weekend, but hopefully we can get more out of him as well, because Treinen had his moments last year, and if he can get back to some form like he was in with Oakland, we could see a real variety of closers this year.
Well, and also with Treinen, there was I don't remember who tweeted it, so forgive me, but someone tweeted a sequence of his pitches. Dang, that dude, the movement on that dude's on the bite on his balls is insane. So, if they can get Treinen, if they can get Knable, going, to that elite level, if you will, that's just not fair in the bullpen. Like that back end of the bullpen, that's just insanity. And again, what's crazy about that too is you still add Victor Gonzalez to the mix. You're still able to get David Price, who once David Price, after obviously there was, the home runs, right? But after those home runs, he settled down and he didn't, he didn't let it fluster him, if you will. And he was able just to kind of get it going. That's one of those things where you can use him as a super reliever, just as Boston did a couple of years ago. And that, again, it's that, we've talked about it a bunch on this podcast, but the embarrassment of riches that the Dodgers have, it's not even fair. And again, if Corey Knable can be, we'll say even 70% of 2017 Corey Knable, I would say. So obviously there isn't like a Cy Young for relievers, but if there was a Cy Young for relievers, Corey Knable would have got it in 17, because that's just how lights out he was. And what's insane was he wasn't even the closer. That's what's crazy about that. But if the Dodgers can get 70% of that, 80% of that, I will take it. Just because that, that dude's stuff is elite, even if it's not 100%. That's what's crazy about it.
I just want to preface this with everybody. It's the first week of the season. Right. I totally understand. The thing about Corey Knable was that Corey Knable got to pitch last year. And he was actually, even though his numbers may not have represented, and I think that's why it was so smart for the Dodgers to do it, I think the Dodgers saw that he was still recovering from his surgery last year. So maybe he wasn't up to par. Maybe we're going to see the benefits this year because Corey Knable is going to be back to what he was. To point out David Price and go back to Jimmy Nelson, these are guys that haven't, in Jimmy Nelson's case, he hasn't pitched since 2018. In David Price's case, he hasn't pitched till 2019. I have to think that it was probably maybe some butterflies, or maybe being on the mound in a game that actually counts for the first time in a long time. So I would like to monitor those guys and see how those guys progress as the season goes on, because I think they can get better. And one thing I do want to point out to you guys, though, because I saw a lot of this on the social media, was Dave Roberts is getting a lot of hate for the lineups this weekend, already giving guys days off. A third game into the season, a fourth game into the season. But I think this is who the Dodgers are. I think if you're upset about that, I don't think you follow the Dodgers, because this is what the Dodgers do. They give their players rest. Well, what did you guys think of day 3? Justin Turner is already on the bench.
I was cool with it. The way I look at it is it's a 162 game season, right? And Justin Turner is not 20 anymore, not 25, not even 30, right? So, you need to give your rest. it's like the NBA thing, the load management thing. You know, you gotta get your guys, you know, get the reps in obviously, but let them get their days off. But at the same time, you have Chris Taylor on the bench. You have Edwin Rios on the bench. We have, you know, the emerging star of Zach McKinstry on the bench. You know, Matt Beatty, who you obviously you guys are not too stoked about, but he's on the bench. You know, it's Austin Barnes, even personal catcher to Clayton Kershaw on the bench. So, you know, you got to get those guys their reps too, because at the end of the day, you know, your superstars are going to, you know, everyday players, right? But at the same time, they got to breathe too. So, I mean, I'm 100% cool with it, but the Dodgers are also showing everyone they have the depth to do that. Like just as a minute ago, as Stephen said, hey, my horse today in the ninth is going to be Corey Knable. Tomorrow, it's going to be Kenley Jansen. The day after that, it's going to be Blake Trinan. There's not a lot of teams that have that option to be able to do those sorts of things day in, day out. And the way that they're able to, you know, strategically do that over a long weekend series, your first series, and they're also playing at altitude. So, you know, you have to take that into account as well. But, you know, honestly, I think it's great for a lot of those guys, because then it's also, you know, letting guys rest, because Corey Seager, a lot of people think he's injury prone, right? So you know, he also had major surgeries. Let's not forget that either. I mean, the surgeries that he had, they weren't just minor surgeries, but, you know, he's getting his breaks in. So, you know, again, I'm cool with it. I'm 100% okay with it. I'm, you know, you can't expect guys to play all 162 games, especially, you know, coming in from a shortened season last year to this year.
What do you think, Stephen?
Yeah, I agree. I it didn't bother me because, you know, I was a little surprised. I thought, well, why isn't Mookie in the lineup today? And but you know, the more I think about it, you know, they're doing a night game followed by a day game followed by travel. It's not, you know, the easiest schedule, even if you have good legs, and in Colorado that sometimes is not what you got. So I didn't mind at all. It was okay, and I think, you know, the point is you want these guys fresh in September and October, right? So, you know, like Robert said, you know, we're not playing a 6-month season. We're playing an 8-month season, and we got to get ready to be playing all the way till almost November 1st. And that's what they have to think about, that they're not going to be, you know, cashing in their chips in September and letting minor leaguers play. They're going to be fighting all the way to the end. And even if they're coasting in September, that they'll want to stay fresh, because they got a whole month of October, hopefully, that they're going to have to play through. So I don't mind it at all.
And also, they also have 7 games in a row to start the season. So I'm cool with it 100%.
True. You know, we've gotten 30 minutes into this, and we haven't brought up the fact that Kenley Jansen pitched a 5-out save on Saturday. I mean, he went an inning and 2/3. Now, mind you, I will say this: when CJ Cron hit that ball off him, I thought that ball was gone. I was like, oh my gosh, Kenley's going to get destroyed. It's his first outing of the season, and he gives up a 3-run home run. But going back to Stephen's point, I think this is a good problem to have for the Dodgers. I mean, if you can lean on Jansen on nights to do that, give you a 5-out, give you a 4-out save, knowing that you got Corey Knable that you can use the next day. I mean, I still love the movement that Blake Trinan has on his ball. I just don't know if Blake Trinan can even control that movement. I think the problem is because Blake Trinan has that so much movement on it, and also he throws hard. If someone just squares up that ball, it's going to go far.
Well, the reason that we didn't bring up Kenley yet is because it was a quiet inning in a third, and that's, to be honest, that's the best Kenley that we want. You know, because
you didn't think that ball that Cronin hit off of him was gone? Did anybody else think that ball was gone?
I thought that swing looked so sweet. It was like, oh man.
Well, and also
I was writing his obituary, but as the ball was flying.
But it's also Coors. I mean, you can get a Zach McKinstry. That ball anywhere else is probably a pop out. And then that ball, you know, the Tapia inception that happened, and it turned into an inside the park home run. I mean, that's the Coors effect. People don't think that the Coors effect's real. It's legit. Like, if you've never played there, if you've never seen a game there, it's wild. Like, routine pop-ups turn into home runs sometimes there. It's insanity.
I'm telling you guys, I logged into Twitter and all I saw was, oh my God. I looked on TV and Kenley Jansen was pitching. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? But it was
And
a UCLA game, so it was all good.
Well, and Roger, as we wrap up the segment here, I kind of wanted to hear from you. How do you feel about the the failure of the 3-1 series win by the Dodgers?
Yeah, I was hoping for 4-0, but I guess we'll take the 3-1.
I guess we'll take the 3-1.
Something going back to the first game. I think they blew a lot of scoring opportunities. They had today was 3-0, like into the seventh. They had like one hit, so it was like kind of a lot of missed opportunities. The second game they obviously poured it on from the start, but the rest of the games it wasn't really that big offensive outburst. So I was kind of hoping, maybe it was Colorado, but obviously Colorado is known for a lot of runs, but it didn't happen. But just getting started. So hopefully, starting tomorrow in Oakland and see what happens there. Oakland hasn't won a game, which, as I mentioned earlier, that doesn't. I hope that's not bad for the Dodgers. That means they might win all 3 of the games, but we'll see what happens in Oakland.
Babyface with the positivity. Just coming in hot with that positivity.
I mean, I always look at it when a team is just like lost 3 games. I'm like, crap. I mean, they're due for a couple wins at least, right?
Well, let me give you this stat to make you feel just a little better. The Dodgers have won 30 of their last 38 games against the Rockies dating back to 2018. Does that make you feel a little better on the inside?
Yeah, but let's get Oakland now. So I'll feel good if we sweep in Oakland. I'll be happy.
Well, and you know what? You helped me with the perfect segue into the next thing. What we ran into it. We joked about it in our group text, but in mid-season form, the Dodgers left a bunch of runners in scoring position. I'm going to start this one with Stephen. Stephen, are you worried about that at all? Obviously that's kind of lingered around the last couple of years, but are you worried about that at all going into this year?
Well, I mean, you have to dig to find something to worry about with the Dodgers, but that is one of them for sure. I'm worried about that. I'm worried about middle relief. They're not clutch. You're right, and on Thursday it was a whole lot of not clutch, but they played much. They were much better. They were 8 of 18 with runners in scoring position on Friday night's game. So when they got the 10 runs, so they were, and they had some timely 2-out hitting on Saturday. So that those 2 things bode well. So I think it got better as the weekend progressed. So I hope that maybe we can get a little bit more clutch hitting, because you're right. That's been a thorn in the Dodgers side for a while.
No, and Juan, the reason I wanted to leave you to the end is because I just wanted to hear animated Juan. So please just take the floor.
I was going to tell you, how I feel about this. I feel like, runners in scoring position, runners left on base is just one of those things that just drives me absolutely through the wall. Yes, I was opening day where I kept texting you guys just saying we are going to be the left on base champions of 2021. But again,
that text in the bottom of the first. In the bottom of the first, we got the left on base champions.
I mean, I will tip my hat to German Marquez on opening day, because he clearly didn't have it, but he made the pitches. He got the double plays when he needed to in order to limit the damage. So the Dodgers aren't out there. I've said this plenty of times. They're not out there playing against themselves. There are other people on that field that are trying to beat them. But that being said, I mean, that first game was just the one thing I am encouraged about is they got out homered in this series, and the Dodgers still won the series 3-1. And that to me is a very good sign. The ability to manufacture runs, I think, is much more important than hitting home runs. I know I may sound like Steve Lyons right now and say that home runs are rally killers. No, I don't subscribe to that. But when you're facing really good pitching, I don't think you can depend on, we'll just, the old Earl Weaver school of thinking, which is we'll just hit a 3-run home run and we'll be good. I mean, in that first inning today, the Dodgers didn't have a hit and they scored 3 runs. And that was more than enough for Julio today, the way he's pitching. I mean, I'm sure what today's game was probably like a throwback to our fans who are old enough, probably watching in the 1960s Dodger baseball when Sandy Koufax was winning games 1-0 because Koufax wasn't getting any run support. So I will say this, Coors Field is just weird. So I do think it is hard to to figure out, okay, what is this team? Because that outfield is just so huge. And then a couple of those balls that were hit off of our pitchers that went out for home runs, I don't think were hit hard. They just carried. Yeah, they made mistakes. So in terms of, it just drove me crazy because it was opening day. It was opening day and poor Kershaw wasn't pitching well. And Kershaw could have very easily have gotten the win, which brings me up to I'm going to digress here. Is the stat of the win now completely useless? I heard a stat on today's broadcast. Actually, it was from yesterday's, that Gray, the pitcher for the Rockies, has the same amount of wins as Jacob deGrom in his career. Yeah.
Gray does, really?
That's what Joe Davis said. If I'm wrong, then all tweets should go to Joe Davis. But Joe Davis said that John Gray had the same amount of career wins as Jacob deGrom. And I'm only digressing here because, for me, Kershaw is a Hall of Famer. But I don't know if we're going to see any pitcher win 300 games anymore. And I just think, if the Dodgers would have opened up the runs, if they would have cashed in on those runners in scoring position in those first 2 innings, maybe Kershaw wins that game. Yeah, maybe Kershaw doesn't pitch that well, but he still got you into the 6th inning. He qualifies for the win. I mean, I think Kershaw might top out by the end of his career, just hitting barely over 200 wins. I don't think we're going to see a 300 win pitcher anymore in the lifespan of Major League Baseball. Am I wrong here, guys?
I don't think there's going to be another 300 guy winner. By the way, I have John Gray winning 45 wins and having 45 wins, and Jacob deGrom having 70. So
okay, so we need to add Joe Davis right there. All the listeners here, add Joe Davis, because Joe Davis dropped that stat in yesterday's game, and I'll go back to MLB TV and capture that for everyone.
I'm just waiting for Joe Davis to sue this podcast for slander. Libel, defamation, the whole thing. It's going to happen. I'm sorry, Joe. It's not my fault.
Scratch Joe Davis off the list.
Yeah, we can take. The list is getting bigger by the day. It's impressive. But I agree with. I do think. Obviously, this could be its own podcast. I don't think there's going to be another 300 win guy. I just don't. I can't see it.
Yeah, I would say Kershaw might make it to 250.
Yeah,
but that would take 5 pretty decent years, and I don't know. Does he have 5 15-win years left in him? I don't know. Probably not. He's got probably 2 good years left in him. And I don't know what he's going to do at the end of his contract. It'll be interesting to see what he decides to do. He might go free agent on us and head back to Texas. We'll see.
We talked about it, and I still don't know, because he also came out and said that he's not ready to retire either. So it could go either way, but crazier things have happened, I guess. But looking ahead, though, to the rest of this upcoming week, this next week, you guys talked about it. They go to Atlanta. Athletics, wrong ATL. And we see the debut of Dustin May. And we also, ironically, it's going to be against our old friend Frankie Montas. I am curious, Stephen. I just wanted to ask you, since you wrote the by the position player preview series, what are you expecting out of Dustin May this season?
Good things. I think he's poised for a great season. I thought he should be the 5th starter, but I thought that maybe Roberts would give it to Price, just sort of as a gift for the track record. But I think Dustin May is the better pitcher right now than David Price, certainly. And I could see him, dominating this year. I really could. And, out of the 5-hole, that's going to be, that's the thing about the Dodgers. When you get the Dodgers in a series, you don't get lucky any day. Like Julio Urias was just lights out, and people say, okay, we survived Julio Urias, but now we get the 5 pitcher and it's Dustin May throwing 99 and breaking off balls that you can't even see how it happens physically. So I think Dustin May is going to have a great year. I really do.
No, and I agree with that. Obviously had a strong spring. He beat out David Price and Tony Gonsolin for that 5th spot in the Dodgers rotation. And last year he went 3-1 with a 2.57 ERA in 12 appearances. So it's not like, it's pedestrian numbers by any stretch. Likewise, not beating out just, Joe Schmo for that 5th spot either. He beat out David Price, a Cy Young guy, just, legit. So I'm expecting good things to come from him. Juan, what I'm curious to hear from you is, so in games 2 and 3, we have Clayton Kershaw and Trevor Bauer going. Obviously, we know what happened with Clayton with that, beginning opening day start, just getting rocked. Allowed those 6 runs, 5 of them were earned on 10 hits. And then Trevor took a no-hitter into the 7th inning in his first start, his Dodgers debut. But obviously that 4-run 7th cost him the quality start. So I'm kind of curious to hear from you. What are you expecting from both of these guys going into their second starts of the season against a currently struggling Oakland Athletics team? Mind you, first series, nonetheless, still 0-3.
Before I tell you that, I just want to go back to, I may have misheard Joe Davis. So I don't want to do any slander on Joe Davis. I may have misheard you. I am going to go back and listen to that broadcast, but I could have sworn that's what I heard. But anyway, Joe Davis, please don't hate us. Maybe you should just come on to the show and defend yourself and call me an idiot here to my face. I have no problem doing that. I will admit when I'm wrong. In terms of the series upcoming, one of the things that I'm really interested to see, I want to see how Kershaw bounces back, especially if the A's are struggling offensively. If we don't see Kershaw pitching, if there's no break on his pitches, because, he didn't look very good his last few spring training outings before the season started. And I don't think he pitched badly, but he didn't pitch good on opening day. So I think it's important to see Kershaw bounce back and have a solid start. But what I'm most interested in seeing is Trevor Bauer pitching the second time around with Will Smith as his catcher. And primarily because Will Smith has a reputation now that I don't know, for some reason that I've heard this, that he just doesn't handle the pitching staff very well. And maybe that was true at some point last year. But Julio pitched a hell of a game today and Will Smith was catching. Buehler pitched well. He gave them 6 innings and Will Smith was catching. Now, I know it's a good problem to have, the fact that you can have Austin Barnes and Will Smith behind the plate. But I have to say, I don't know how much longer we can keep Will Smith from not playing every day. Will Smith, the guy is 4 for 7 on the series. I know it's a limited sample size, but he hit a home run today. And I thought the reason why this guy got into the majors was because of his defense. I was not expecting this from his bat. And last year he was solid. And this year he seems to be just really seeing the ball very well. So I'm curious to see Trevor Bauer in the second time around, and also Will Smith catching him, because if Bauer again gives us another solid start, if he's dominating again, I maybe that whole storyline about Will Smith not being able to handle this pitching, or not handling this pitching staff as well as Austin Barnes, will go away. But maybe again, am I hearing this wrong? Did no one else hear this about Stephen? Did you hear anything about Will Smith not handling the pitchers well last year?
I have not heard that, but it's
wow. I'm just going to stop talking.
Yeah, well, it could be. It could be. It's interesting what you mentioned about Trevor Bauer, and I want to ask you guys your opinion on this. Sure. Because there was like 2 comparison games that you could watch this weekend. One was the Trevor Bauer game where he had a no-hitter through 6, came out in the 7th, and things did not go well for him, right? And it was touch and go there for a little. Luckily the Dodgers had all those runs, but they didn't play that well in that 7th inning. Cut to Milwaukee, where Jose Barrios for the Twins was also throwing a no-no through 6, and they lift him. So which move do you prefer at this point in the season? Obviously, if you're built up and you're going, and you got a no hitter going, you say, well, let him go as long as he can go. But they lifted Barrios, and he had not a hit on his resume at the moment. So what do you think? You agree with that move, or do you think it would better to go the Bauer route and just let it play out?
Look, I texted Roger and I said it doesn't matter because Roberts is going to pull him. Because I was just thinking of that game. I don't know how long ago, the Sterling game, the Ross Stripling. The Ross Stripling game in San Francisco. Now, mind you, Stripling was just coming off the Tommy John surgery, and he had more pitches. But I was like, here we go again. Roberts is going to have to make a controversial, and I don't think I would blame him. It's too early in the season. Do you really want your pitcher going over 100 pitches when they haven't even been stretched out yet?
I lift him too, if I'm honest with you. I lift him. It's too early in the season. It's also, mind you, obviously the Dodgers are going to make an analytical decision, right? Trevor can't be pissed about that because he's all about the analytics. So at the end of the day, for me, and I don't know what Trevor's, lines are after, the 5th, 6th, 7th innings, whatever, or the pitch counts, whatever. Regardless, I would have lifted him just because it's the first start of the season. Now, if he's in 2 or 3, maybe 4 starts and they're in the same situation, obviously I'd look at it a little differently. But start number 1, I'm lifting him.
Yeah, I would have probably lifted him after that first home run. I would have said, we got enough out of you today. Thanks.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Babyface?
He was like at 75. He was like at 75 pitches, I think, going in the 7th.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, the only way he's gonna get a chance if he goes out in the next 2 innings and throws about 8 pitches each inning,
right?
Or else, it's too early in the season to let him go over 100 pitches. We knew he was gonna get pulled.
Well, and you know what? One thing that I respect about Trevor and that I respected about that outing is what he did. A couple of days ago, the Dodgers Foundation announced that the case for cause for a cause, initiative, where it's the Trevor's going to donate $1,000 per strikeout. He had 10. So it's like, it wasn't like it was just some pedestrian start,
and he got his free jumbo jacks.
And jumbo jacks, yes. But
because if the Dodgers get 10 strikeouts in a game, you get a free jumbo jack the next day.
I thought it was 7.
No, it's 10.
Oh, it's 10. Well, shit. 10. There you go.
Available tomorrow as well.
See, so
they had 10 today.
Yeah, 10 today.
All right.
So tomorrow, hit up your Jack in the Box.
So hit up your local Jack in the Box and get your free Jumbo Yak.
But now we can thank Jimmy Nelson, right?
Yeah. Where are the Jimmy Nelson hate? Where's all the Jimmy Nelson hate now? I better see you at Jack in the Box.
You're not hating when you're eating that free jumbo jack, are you?
Yeah, where's all the slander now?
Exactly.
But you know what? At 10 strikeouts, it wasn't all for a lost cause, but as Oral Hershiser said on the broadcast, that no hitter went from, hey, now the game's on the line. But a part of the reason he said why the game's on the line, it's Coors. That's the oddity of Coors Field. Whereas now they're going over to Oakland where it doesn't have the same, effect. Granted, that outfield is just as gigantic, but I'm not expecting a sweep like Roger is, but 2 out of 3, I feel like is a reasonable expectation going into that series. And I know Roger's going to stay up at night thinking about why isn't this just a sweep prediction, but here we are. I digress. We're still going to get sued though. We're getting sued by Joe Davis and we're getting sued by Will Smith. I have not heard the Will Smith thing. So be prepared to be just
and Jacob DeGrom. Don't forget
Jacob DeGrom's also going to sue your ass. He can afford to sue you now. So these
will hopefully all be guests thanks to me. So I will jump on the grenade for you guys.
Hey, listen, someone's got to do it because we're all getting sued. Asterisk sued. But lastly, want to end it with the top 10 jerseys dropped that were sold in all of baseball, and we're this is the Mike Trout segment of the podcast, so that's why it's here. But Mike Trout is 10.
Before we start, I heard it was actually the top 10 since the World Series, so that's why we get a couple of I guess weird spots in there.
But regardless, it's still unacceptable that Mike Trout's 10.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like I don't care. I don't care if it's from like last Friday to now or whatever, from the start of spring to now. There's absolutely no plausible reason that Mike Trout is at 10. And you know what? A notable, like not on the list that I'm surprised is Shohei Ohtani. I'm surprised that Shohei's not on that list either. So I'm kind of curious to hear from all three of you, and we'll start with Stephen. And the reason we're actually, I'm just gonna just preface this with Juan will be last because we're gonna get sued after this segment too. Um, but as far as the way that those rankings go, and Mookie's at the top, and the kind of the usual suspects, Cody Bellinger's on the list, etc. Do you think it's fair to start, essentially saying it's a cataclysmic failure as to how MLB is marketing Mike Trout, or is that is there another way to kind of lay that out as to why Trout is at 10?
Well, I mean, it's hard to market a guy who doesn't play in October. That's been Mike Trout's problem. He's had very few playoff appearances, and the playoff appearances he's had have not gone well. So Mike Trout is sort of that mystery player. Playing on the West Coast doesn't help either. There's a lot of games that start when everybody in New York has gone to bed, and you see like MLB Network, when they do their showcase games, they never do a West Coast game. It's always, where can Bob Costas go in and out? Philadelphia, and that's about it, and so the Dodgers, I mean, have had a 4-year run at World Series and near World Series every year, so it's something that is logical that they would get a lot of jersey sales. Mike Trout just isn't on that national stage, and he just doesn't get. I mean, they had him on tonight, which God bless him for ESPN putting Mike Trout out there finally. When they had Ohtani and was pitching against, who was he pitching against tonight? Ohtani.
I can't remember who from the White Sox. Juan, do you remember who it was from the White Sox?
No, I didn't recognize the name.
It could be. I know it wasn't my Cy Young pit, Mr. Giolito.
No, it was not Giolito.
But yeah, Giolito I think pitches tomorrow. But it will be interesting to see if they can get Mike Trout a little more exposure, because at least tonight they had a game, Angels and White Sox. That's a good matchup for ESPN, because those are two teams you don't see very often. And I mean, I've banged that drum for a long time. It's just the Boston, New York centric ESPN is just pathetic and sad to me, that it's just so East Coast centered, all of the national games that you see on TV, that it's really tough for West Coast teams to get that exposure. And I mean, the Dodgers had to kind of kick and fight their way through it. But you remember like the first time that they were making this real strong playoff run, that they were getting day games. They were getting day games that they were playing in the first round of the playoffs. It's like, this is Los Angeles Dodgers, and you're putting them on day. And it's like, oh well, we got to get those Yankees at night. It's just so this is a very sore spot with me.
What say you, Juan?
And with me, Stephen. So I'll be like, I'm going to be brief, because I'm not going to say anything new that you haven't heard. I blame this at the hands of Robert Manfred and all the people that handle marketing with Major League Baseball. I ditto everything Stephen said. I mean, Stephen is spot on. I will say this, though. I point out, he writes for ESPN, Clinton Yates. Clinton Yates had a little 2-minute video that he put out on Twitter. It was called Drip Drive. And in it, he was talking about the style of certain players. He focused on Fernando Tatis. I mean, Bryce Harper. He did more in those 2 minutes to promote the game of baseball than Major League Baseball has done in the last 5 years. I think this list is a reflection of how poorly they've marketed Major League Baseball, and also, unfortunately, shows proof that baseball is no longer a national game. It is regional, and Dodger fans represent. If anything, this list, I think, goes to prove to everyone that Dodger fans are hardcore baseball fans. I feel Dodger fans get a bad rap sometimes, supposedly because we show up in the 3rd inning and we leave in the 7th inning. But We go to that stadium every year, regardless of how good or bad the team is, except when McBankrupt owned the team. But other than that, this is a loyal fan base. We will spend our money. Mookie, Cody Bellinger's on there, Kershaw's on there, and I bet you the majority of those jersey sales for Kike, especially since it's coming from the end of the World Series, are coming from Dodger fans and not Boston Red Sox fans. So for me, I would hope that Major League Baseball would be better at showing the world how talented these guys are, because in my opinion, the hardest thing to do in sports is to hit a baseball. And there's a lot of guys who do that well in this league, and they deserve to be superstars.
No lies detected. But on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of the Bleed Los podcast. Real quick, one programming, or two things. One, our podcast will be dropping every Monday now from here throughout the rest of the season. So now that we're playing baseball, we're just going to do this thing every at the end of every week. And two, we have a Twitter for our podcast. It's the Bleed Los podcast, which is at Bleed Los Pod. So please give us a follow there. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to this podcast. Any feedback, ratings, all that jazz, it helps us in trying to book people that are not trying to sue this podcast. So all of that would be really appreciated. If we are back next week and are not sued because of Juan's slander, we've all recapped how the week went out. And but until then, it's your boys Alonso Juan with the babyface gimmick voice in the sky, Roger. And a very, very big thanks to Stephen Webb. Stephen, where can they follow you on the internet?
At Stephen R. Webb 3.
There it is. Go give them a follow. The articles are dope. And again, they're on our page for Dodgersbeat. But again, please give us a follow at Bleed Los Pod. And until next week, we will catch you down the road. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.